Hello, this is Bob Cooke here. Welcome to my YouTube channel, TA Therapy. And my presentation today is again using the TA model, so it'll be useful for TA therapists and TA counsellors. I will be looking particularly at how we recognize and diagnose ego states. In other words, how do we recognize when the client is coming from the parent ego state, the adult ego state, the child ego state, and the model I'm going to particularly look at is 4 methods of diagnosis in order to spot this. Number 1 is the behavioural diagnosis. Number 2 is the social diagnosis. Number 3 is the historical diagnosis. And 4 is the phenomenological diagnosis. All very important signposts in looking how people communicate and various problems they might have in energy blocks and the way forward. So let's first of all start off with the behavioural model. Okay, so we need to look at the words, how they speak. Do the words signify a person coming from their parent ego state? Such words as ought, must, always, these sort of parental words which denote commands or belief systems. We can then look at their tone of voice, whether their tone of voice is critical, condescending, loving, comforting, even, precise, free, loud, energetic, happy. In other words, which ego state do you think the tone of voice is presenting? Then we can look at gestures. How do they gesture? What are their gestures? Are they pointing fingers? Are they frowning? Are they angry? Have they got open posture? Is their gestures accepting, smiling? Do they appear thoughtful, alert, open? Are they pouting, sad, spontaneous? What do the gestures actually indicate in terms of which particular ego state they are coming from? Is it the gestures of a young child, the gestures of a teenager, the gestures of a young adult, the gestures of a mature adult, or even the gestures of parents and particular past figures? And we need to sort of imagine what ego state these gestures particularly come from. Then we need to look at postures. How is the person's posture? For example, are they leaning forward, the head in front of the body? Are they quite erect, or are they very still? Is their posture loose, relaxed, agile? Is it closed or is it tight? Just think, even close your eyes and think about what the posture suggests in terms of ego states. Again, is it the posture of a young child, developmentally, or parents perhaps? And then we can move on to facial expressions. I think in terms of what do their facial expressions show, all indicating is a person coming from a child, adult, or a parent ego state in terms of how they actually behave. Okay, so that's very important. In fact, it's a subset for the other different levels I'm going to go to now. So let's go to the next level. So added to the behavioural diagnosis, which we've been actually looking at when we're talking to our clients, we need another diagnosis really, which I'm going to call a social diagnosis here, and particularly different types of transactions can be happening between you and the client, and even between the different states of the client themselves. So there could be an adult-to-adult transactions going on with you. There could be parent or child transactions going on with you. There could be parent-to-parent child actions going on with you. There could be child-to-child transactions, or there could be child-to-parent transactions. The most important thing for you to think about is what actual ego state are they inviting you into. So if they are actually coming from a child place and inviting you to be a parent for parental response, then you can think about, oh, perhaps they're in child. If they're in parent themselves and you feel they're inviting into a child response, then perhaps that backs up that they're actually in the parent ego state. So it's important for you to think about, what ego state are they inviting you to be in? So, for example, you might feel like being in a parent, which means they're probably in child. You may feel like being in an adult, which is probably coming from adult. Or you might feel you want to be coming from a different ego state. So this is an important diagnosis in terms of social diagnosis, which will back up what you've learned from your behavioural diagnosis. Okay, another third diagnosis, which is going back, to the next slide, is the historical diagnosis. And that simply means asking questions such as, how were you as a child? Asking historical questions like, how was that for you when you were a kid? When you did this with your mum and dad, what actually happened? Asking about their memory of how they were with their parents and how they behaved. So you're getting some idea to back up about how much they bring their past into the present in terms of ego states. And finally, another level of diagnosis, which I think is just as important as the other three, which is phenomenological diagnosis. That is, when we re-experience the past instead of just remembering it. So, for example, when you are when you're with a client and the client says things like, oh, when you look at me like that, I just feel and think like a 3-year-old, just as I was when I was talking to my father. So there we are, you've got an idea then that client has rubber-banded back to a child ego state. So if you're putting all these different levels together, you can then get an accurate hypothesis about what ego state they predominantly put their energy in or are coming from. Now, for an accurate diagnostic system, you need to measure this over many sessions to see what ego state they predominantly come from, or what ego state most of their energy is from, and that will give you an indication of treatment planning and the way forward, in terms of how much work will we need to be done with the child ego state, or indeed the parent ego state. And in fact, it would also give you indication of what person they're projecting onto you. So it's very important to do ego state diagnosis, because that will lead on to the particular treatment planning process you then will follow in the Transactional Analysis program. Okay, I hope that was useful to you, and I think it's a very important system to get your head around, and look forward to speaking to you again with another presentation soon. Okay, bye-bye.